Lumos. Hello people of YouTube, welcome back to yet another video on our channel, Creative Readers, etc., the channel where we do creative things that sometimes involve reading, etc. I'm Cassandra, I'm one of the 3 people that run this channel. There's also Lexi and Maddie. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing my O.W.L.s Magical Readathon wrap-up slash books that I read in April slash, there's no other slash, but I have a lot of books. And you can kind of see over my shoulder here the stack of them. So let me get rid of this thing right here. There we go. First off, I want to mention how many books I read, which was 17. I'm shocked, and you can thank quarantine, or I can thank quarantine. And then the total amount of pages that I read was 5,845. It boggles my mind that I read over 5,000 pages this month. It's crazy. The career that I actually wanted to achieve was Mage of Visual Arts, and I did achieve that along with 2 different seminars. The first seminar was Animagus training, and the second was Magical Shop Management. I thought that would be a handy one to have in my back pocket just in case I decide to run a shop in Diagon Alley. So now I'm going to speak to you about all the different books that I read in kind of the order of my career, my seminars, and then all the extra books that I ended up picking up this month. Starting out week is The Night Circus. This book I felt was very unnecessarily long. It was very descriptive, which I see some people would enjoy, but for me, if you have so much description that you're taking a paragraph to describe like a ribbon, you lose me in the story because I just couldn't immerse myself in it because it was too much description. But that's my opinion. I know a lot of people enjoyed it. The ending was actually my favorite part, which is ironic considering the ending is a lot of people's least favorite parts, but for me, I enjoyed the ending and I liked the thought of it. I did not like the execution, unfortunately. This was for the subject arithmancy, and it was to read a book completely at night. The next subject was charms, and that was to read a book with a white cover, and I chose The Raven Boys, which is the first book in the Raven cycle. This book, it was a reread. It was a lot more comprehensible the second time that I read it because this book series I feel like is very complex, and if you miss a detail, you're gonna be confused. So it's a book that you have to like slowly chip away at to like process everything in your brain, in my opinion, but the second time through I definitely enjoyed it more because I understood what was going on more. Divination was my next subject, and that was to randomly assign numbers to your TBR list and then use a random number generator to pick a book, and that random numberator and fate itself chose The Valiant. This book read like a middle grade in my opinion, and the font was like extremely big as well. I did enjoy it though. It was very fast paced, especially compared to the fact that I've read a couple slow books, like really slow books before this. So this was just like constant action. So if you enjoy a book that has constant action and kind of like a fun, fast read, I definitely recommend The Valiant. Then the last subject that I needed to become a Mage of Visual Arts was History of Magic, which was to read a book featuring witches or wizards, and so I chose The Last Magician, which feature, they're like mages? I can't quite pronounce it correctly, I don't think, but this book kept me on the edge of my seat. The plot twists, the plot itself, the characters, I was definitely invested, definitely curious about what was gonna happen, what was going on. The ending made me mad, so I ended up putting the second book on my TBR for next month because I need to know what happens. But that is my thoughts on The Last Magician, and that was the last book that I needed to become a Mage of Visual Arts and pass my O.W.L.s, so now I'm set to do my newts in August. Next, we're moving on to the seminars, and the first one was Animagus training, and for that you needed to read a book outside your favorite comfort zone for the subject arithmancy. So I chose The Girl on the Train because it was considered a psychological thriller. I, however, thought it was the most boring psychological thriller. Really? I can't get my shit together. The characters, the plot itself, the writing, nothing enticed me with this book. Nothing jumped out at me to actually make me want to continue reading it. The only reason I did was because that G had put on Twitter that there was a 2-hour reading sprint, and I was like, oh, I can get a good chunk into this. And so I sat for 2 hours and I read this book, and I had a little bit more left. So I read for another half an hour to finish this book. And it was boring, it was disappointing. It was nothing like I imagined, definitely outside of my comfort zone. And it was boring. For potions, it was to read a book under 150 pages, and I kind of cheated, but I found the shortest book on my TBR, but it wasn't really on my TBR, it was just the shortest book I could find that I wanted to read, and that was The White Giraffe. I read it as a kid, and that's that. I didn't thoroughly enjoy it, I wasn't invested in anything, I just was like, I read this as a kid, I want to reread it. And so I reread it, and it was just meh. Just the characters were meh. Nothing really popped out at me about this book, but I read it and I passed potions, so can't complain. And I also cheated a little bit on the next one, and that was for Transfiguration. I read Warcross. Transfiguration was supposed to feature shapeshifters. Warcross, they shapeshift into the characters in the video game. Yeah, I know it's a stretch, I know, but I counted it because also I read Harry Potter, so that could technically count as well, but I'm counting Warcross as it just because. My thoughts on Warcross. It's a reread. I like the characters a lot. I like this plot. I like the storyline. That's the same thing. You catch my drift. It was a reread though, and it was a reread that I knew I wanted to read again this year, so now it's checked off my TBR for rereads. And this book concludes my animagus training for the O.W.L.s, so another thing passed. So now we're gonna move on to the next seminar that I did, which was Magical Shop Management. And for that, you only need one subject, and that was arithmancy. And for arithmancy, the prompt was to read a book outside your comfort zone, so I chose Jane Eyre. Scratch that, I didn't choose Jane Eyre, it was required reading for my college English class. So I had to read it, and then I just counted it because it worked. And this book, it was interesting. I enjoyed it. I did. I don't usually enjoy classics, and I don't usually enjoy required reading, but something about this book just kept me interested and kept me intrigued, and I listened to it on audiobook, so I definitely enjoyed the narrator. However, I don't agree with a lot of things that went on in this book. The ending, but I enjoyed it. So Jane Eyre was the book that I picked to then be qualified to run a shop, or at least I passed the O.W.L.s, so I'm halfway being able to run a shop in Diagon Alley, which who wouldn't want to do, honestly? Those were the seminars and my career. Those are all the books that I read for those. However, now we're going to talk about all the extra books that I ended up picking up in between doing my O.W.L.s. So we're going to start talking about Wildcard. Wildcard is the second book in the Warcross duology. It wraps up the series. I love it. I freaking love it. The characters, the plot, everything about it. I just adore it. And I love how it ends. And, well, I mean, there's always that feeling when you read a good book series and it ends, you're like, no. But I was satisfied. This was a reread. However, I literally, when I started reading it, like, I could not remember what happened. So it felt like I was reading it again for the first time. So I definitely did enjoy it. Next was the Dream Thieves, which is the second book in the Raven Cycle series. And, oh, this was a tough book to get through. It was very, very boring in my opinion. It featured the character Ronan, which was probably the main problem because I just don't care enough about Ronan to read a whole book about him. But guess who read a whole book about Ronan, even though I didn't really like the character. However, I am going to continue on with the Raven Cycle series just because the next book is, I think, featuring Blue. And I'm just curious on what the heck's going to happen and where the series is going to begin with. So I'm still going to continue on the series, but the second book was not very good for me. Changing pace from a disappointing book, we're going to talk about a whole series that I'm wholly invested into and I'm definitely going to reread in the future. And that is the Legend series. Wow. This book series, I know it's super old, and I know everyone's already read it before, but this was my first time reading it. And let me just speak about them really quick. Legend. Holy crap, got me invested into the characters so quickly. I immediately fell in love with Day. Holy crap, I didn't expect to, but I've heard so many good things. I was like a little apprehensive, but I definitely fell in love with the characters, and I really liked the whole dystopian world that they were in and where it was going. Next, Prodigy. The ending broke my soul, and the beginning was a little slow because they were doing more world building, and I got hair in my eye, and I'm not a huge fan of world building, so it was a little slow for me to get into, but then after I got about 100 pages in, once again, invested, love the story, love everything about this series. And then the final book, Champion. Once again, the ending, I was satisfied even though it broke my heart. I read this in one sitting. I just could not put it down. Just my heart and soul got so invested into these characters, and I loved the ending, and it was a really good series. So if you haven't read the Legend series before, I highly recommend it. I can't believe I haven't read it before, so I'm a little late to the game, like by a lot of years, but so good. The next book was actually the first book I read in the month, and it was at midnight on the 1st, and that was Gamer Girl. It's, yeah, I know, okay, I know. It was just a fun reread. I've read this book so many times. It's a book you have to go in knowing that there's gonna be a lot of cliches, and just, it was just lovely. You know, it's a warm-hearted read, full of cliches, as I said before, and I'll say it again, but I've read it before and I love it. It just puts me in a reading mood. So I've read this literally at midnight till like 1 a.m. and it was worth it because I really enjoyed it, as always. Nothing more to say. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was another book I read. It was in celebration of the 3rd year of the O.W.L.s, and this was the first time that I actually just picked up a book in the middle of a series and I read it. And it shocked me, because I've read this book series enough times where I can do that to any of the books, because I know the whole stories back to front, front to back, middle to front, middle to beginning, all of that. But I appreciated this book a lot more than I did previously, because I'm not usually a huge fan of it, but maybe it was just like all the Twitter participation and everything that was happening that I don't know, I got more invested into it this time. And I did enjoy it. I always enjoy the Harry Potter series, but I did appreciate this one more than I ever have before in my previous rereads. Next was continuing on a reread of the Ranger's Apprentice series, my all-time favorite series in the whole wide world. If you haven't read the Ranger's Apprentice series before, I highly recommend you do. If you get nothing from this video, just know I want you to read the Ranger's Apprentice series. The characters, you just can't help but love them. This book, I just love. It's now, if I had to rank the Ranger's Apprentice series, I think this one's now higher up because I really enjoyed it this time. And I always enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but this book just, it was so funny. Like, some of the lines that the characters were saying had me literally laughing out loud, and I've read it before and I know what happens, but it was cracking me up and I really enjoyed it. And the final book that I read, well, not necessarily the final, this wasn't any particular order, but this chunker, Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare, it was good. However, the characters I still don't care about. I actually care more about the storyline, and like, I'm just curious about what's gonna happen because I'm not really invested into the characters at all. They just complain about everything. And in some cases, yes, they have the right to complain, but in other cases I'm like, guys, knock it off. Had me on the edge of my seat. I read it basically all in one day. And I say basically because I read the first 40 pages the day before, but then the rest of the 620 something pages book I read. I have the second book on my TBR for next month. I'm excited to finish the series. But I hope that I grow more attached to the characters in the next book, because this one, I just couldn't connect. Even though I really enjoyed it, I just couldn't connect to the characters, weirdly enough. So those were all the books that I completed during the O.W.L.s Magical Readathon in April 2020. There's no way, if I didn't have all the free time from quarantine, that I would have completed all those books, but it was definitely worth it. There's so many books that I read that I wouldn't have read before and that I'm now going to continue on the series for, so I'm excited to do that. But for now, I want to thank you for watching to the end of the video. So if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like and comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you agree with some of my opinions or disagree. I'm really curious. Also, consider subscribing to our channel if you want to see more creative content such as bullet journal videos and speed arts, bookish content such as book hauls and book vlogs, and etc., which is whatever the heck we feel like posting. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys! Nux.